Happy New Year and welcome to the Stafford Connect podcast. I'm Tom Coen. So I'm calling this my Janus episode. For those of you not up to speed with your ancient Roman mythology, Janus is the god of beginnings, transitions, and endings. And that pretty much summarizes where America is in its political life right now. The 2024 election is behind us. The president-elect has chosen his cabinet. Election results have been certified. Congress will meet on January 6th to make it all official. Inauguration Day is January 20th, and there's already discussion about the next elections. So there's a lot to unpack. We'll begin our discussion this evening with a look at the national elections this past November. Democrats are still in the throes of trying to figure out what happened, while Republicans are doing a little bit of celebrating and maybe a little bit of gloating. We'll try to sort some of that out for you. And then we'll turn our attention to the process of setting up a new government. As expected, President-elect Trump seems to be approaching this task in the phrase usually used, disruptor in chief. And the Democrats are objecting. We'll talk about what all this means to the rest of us and the state of our politics. And then we'll close with a discussion on some of the important state and local races coming up to us in this year of 2025. And who better to talk with about all of this than my old friend and colleague, David Kerr, who I've invited onto the program again to help me consider it all. Hello, David, and welcome back to Stafford Connect.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Tom.
Well, always great being with you. And for our guests and our audience, why don't you go over and sort of reacquaint us with you in case they haven't seen our episode where you are on before.
Well, that's fair enough. Let's see. I've been in Stafford County since 1989, a long time. I was on the county school board for 2 terms. Enjoyed that a lot. And I've written for just about every Stafford publication there is, the Stafford Journal, the Stafford Sun, the Stafford Magazine, the Freelance Star. So I'm kind of up on state and local issues. Usually there's something that surprises me, though. And, I have a little farmette, only 3 acres, but 2 horses, and live in 7 lakes in Rock Hill.
And you're an educator.
That's right. Had to take a little time off for health reasons, but teach at VCU.
Yep, about a decade now.
Yeah.
Yep. And which I know you liked, and the students thought very highly of you. So,
well, as I understand, Truth of Lending, Tom's a former VCU adjunct professor, and his students were taken with him as well, as I saw in data.
Well, and we know they had to replace us with a former lieutenant governor, so we must have done something right.
Yeah, we only are replaced by elected officials with CVs going out the arm.
Right. All right. So let's get into it. When you were on before with us, we talked about the November election. When that was, we taped it in September and we showed it in October. And so if memory serves, the thought process back then that it was going to be a close election. But in reality, it ended up not being very close. Trump won the Electoral College by 312 to 226. And he had a massive swing in almost every state. I think there's only one state in the country he didn't increase his vote turnout. Any thoughts?
Well, I would say we got it entirely wrong. It was curious. There were 7 swing states that were considered pivotal to get to that magic number that Donald Trump got to. And we, the Democrats, Kamala Harris and Governor Walz managed to lose all 7. Not by tremendous margins, but by substantial margins. And the overall, I think it was 1.6% national in the popular vote. Mm-hmm. So I'd say a lot of things went into calling that wrong. One thing is, as much as I'm always jaundiced towards the polls, saying, "Oh, the polls aren't very good," even when they're going our way, the fact of the matter was, I believed them. The average of the polls show these very narrow margins. A slight push this way, a slight push that way. The whole election's turned over, and frankly, I guess when it comes down to it, when you're running for office, as you well know, and I do too, but
Mm-hmm.
you ran for a bigger office. If you don't make the compelling case, it's like going to court. You have to say, why am I better than the other candidate, and what am I going to deliver, and why should you cast your valuable vote for me? And we did not make that case.
And it was sort of interesting because when we did our show before, I said if Harris loses, it'll be because she did one of two things wrong, and one was she didn't separate herself from the Biden administration, and or she didn't give clear views on issues, because the Nikki Haley, the Republicans that either stayed home or went to Biden 4 years ago, wanted specific proposals and plans and wanted to know what exactly she was going to do. Because in the Biden campaign, it was, I'm going to unite the country and we're going to work together. And they didn't see that, and they wanted to really see something tangible. And she didn't do either, which is sort of an interesting, it's not as though she had to worry about her left. I mean, you and I know people locally and famously who said they would vote for Joe Biden's head in a jar over Donald Trump. So it's not as though
shades of Futurama.
Right. Yes, really. And so it's not as though she couldn't have moved to the center with specific policies. Because where were they going to go? They were not going to vote for Trump. So it's just really, she ran a horrible campaign.
It's simply, she really should have gone more towards the center. And she should have separated herself from Biden. You go back into ancient history. You go back to 1968, when Hubert Humphrey was running against Richard Nixon, and Humphrey did not separate himself from L.B. Lyndon Johnson, who was the president at the time. The Vietnam War was raging, and had he distinguished himself from the Johnson campaign, he probably would have won. He should have set his own course.
Right.
And I say there's one other factor in this election that figured rather heavily. When you look at the macroeconomic statistics, they're pretty good. When you look at when you visit Wise markets, and you find that milk is $7 a gallon, and meats are $12 and $14. What was the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, doesn't mean as much, and I would say that to a great extent that had a lot to do with it. Price inflation. Presidents have a tough time doing anything about inflation because you really can't control it. At the same token, you're held responsible for it, and that's just a fact. So she was closely aligned with the Biden administration, and at the same token, with that, the inflation and inflation primarily in foodstuffs.
Well, and in gasoline, it's interesting because the Bill Clinton thing was, it's the economy stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, when a couple of years ago when my mom was alive and I went to go food shopping, it was under $100. Now it's myself and 2 animals and some things for the students, and it's $175 to go get things. And getting my truck filled is a ridiculous, like $50 a gallon. And so you're right. It was saying there and telling people, hey, you don't believe what you see in the supermarket and your checkbook and the fact that you're not buying as much because you can't afford it. Trust us that the macro is wonderful, or the ever popular, it's worse in Europe. Well, I don't live in Europe, so don't tell, that doesn't do any good. But also other things like crime. Person after person on television would say that crime is better and crime is down, but there were enough sources from other, media outlets, not just Fox, but CNN and Washington Post and et cetera, that pointed out that major cities had not put in their statistics. So the statistics weren't whole. And then if you paid attention to the news, you knew that a lot of places in big cities and whatnot were not prosecuting people for crimes. The people doing snatch and grabs and things of that nature. Mm-hmm. So that's not it. And then if you just watch the news and you see X number of carjackings, Or you go to the store and it's more northern Virginia and down in Richmond and stuff, where they put locks over things at the grocery store because people are shoplifting it. And it's sort of like, what you want me not to believe what I can see, but believe what you're telling me, and really is a disconnect when you're trying to get people to go along with it. And Harris and people who liked her said that she's very cautious. But one of my favorite stories was the weekend before the election when she absentee voted. They asked her how she was voting on a referendum on crime in California, which the polls said was going to pass by 70% or so. And she wouldn't give an answer. And, and you're thinking, this is a referendum that's going to pass, and you're not going to give your opinion on it. Who are you going to offend? I mean, why is it you will not give a clear answer on what you think about this issue 3 days of the election? I mean, by that point, the millions of people had voted early. You're not going to impact those anyways. So it just was, she was not a good candidate. I find it interesting that they're saying that some people are running around saying that, it just wasn't enough time. And she was
it was 100. To be fair, it was a 107-day campaign from not being a candidate to being the candidate for president. And, most people who are running for office have been doing it for years. So that there was very little time to carve out a niche for herself. She didn't do a very good job of doing that if given that opportunity.
Right, and she didn't carve a niche for herself.
And she didn't carve a niche for herself.
So it's sort of like saying we gave you 107 days, and 30-some, I think it was 32 or 36 days, she didn't do any interviews of it. And then you never carved a niche on almost any issue. I mean, they asked her on a softball program, how would you do anything different from Biden's administration? She said, I can't think of anything. Well, you could have come up with an artful way to say that without saying, I can't think of anything.
No, it kind of reminds me of what was the story about Richard Nixon and Dwight Eisenhower?
Oh, yes. Yep.
Where Ike kind of just sort of being Ike was asked, what major decisions did Vice President Nixon participate in? Give me a week and I'll think of something.
Yep.
That hurt.
So it just sort of, it was an interesting watching it all and seeing how it shifted and morphed. I don't know whether the people who are saying that she did, there's some people still on TV saying she ran a flawless campaign and she was a wonderful candidate.
Well, when it was not a horrible campaign, but it was not. She didn't win.
Well,
at the end of the day, that's
right. She didn't win. Plus, she spent over $2 billion.
Yeah,
$1 billion+ and they still, according to Carville, they don't know where some of the money went. And some of the people who are the talking heads say, well, she got 49% of the vote. Well, a good chunk of that 49 was going to vote for Joe Biden's head in a jar because they hated Trump. Same way, yes, she raised $1 billion, but they were going to give that to Joe Biden, or Joe Biden's head in a jar, or somebody, whoever it was, because the money was raised to stop Trump. So I think they're doing her a disservice if they're saying, oh, look at how much money you raised and how close you came, and you can run again and you're going to be wonderful, because I don't think they're there.
I think there's no way she's going to run for any office again. There's been some talk of her running for governor of California. I don't think that's necessarily a starter. There's another one. Richard Nixon, after he lost the 1960 election, ran for governor of California and lost. I'd say you had a good run. You fought nobly and well. Now retire.
Yep.
Write a book. Go on a lecture tour. Yeah, I'm sure it would be interesting.
All right. So the what, if anything, did Trump do well or not well or what?
Well, I had a tough time reading this campaign because, frankly, all along I thought it was sort of the Trump campaign was sort of a big mess up. It seemed like it was a little bit on the crazy side. As somebody put it it wasn't me, but said that it was he was selling a brand, which I guess you do in politics, and he he said as many crazy things as he's capable of, and he actually came out on top. So I have a tough time figuring out what the Trump campaign did that was so right.
Well, and it's sort of, and I don't know, just from watching it on the outside, he sort of knew that the upper income, upper educated people that had voted against him probably the last two times he ran weren't going to come to him. And so he wisely figured out that if you pull up you tie into some of the Democratic base of African Americans, Hispanics, and you get more union members and more people who are not normal voters.
That's a really, really good point you're making right there. And I apologize for interrupting.
No, that's okay.
There was an article in the Washington Post talking about how the young men in particular who had been attracted to Bernie Sanders, the left-wing senator from Vermont, and his populist campaign, a large percentage of them went and voted for Trump. And I think I think, frankly, he reached out, and whatever I say about his campaign or his craziness, and I think some of it was kind of crazy, and it'd be hard to argue that some of it wasn't. He nonetheless appealed to the disaffected voters, people who felt like they were being left out of the entire race. They feel this disassociated with the political process. Their economic perspective is that I'm left out of that, and so.
And it's funny because it goes against the norm, which when you say it's like crazy, but I would never anywhere give a big speech about Arnold Palmer's body parts.
No, I could never.
However,
I can never imagine you doing that.
At the event that he did that,
except for that one time at the fire department.
At the event that he did that, he was surrounded by union workers, and most of the audience was union workers. So it's blue collar guys, and it was locker room talk.
Mm-hmm.
And it went to exactly what you're saying, hitting those people who normally don't vote, that felt disconnected. And I mean, and it plays against sort of the type that, when we teach politics and we're doing propaganda, and we say that everybody wants to be plain folks and nobody wants to be, the glamour. And he sort of and he's always pushing the glamour and wins. But in this one, it was really clear when he was going for the common folk, the blue collar vote, the ordinary people type thing. And so, as I said, that if you look at some of the events where he said weird things that people would say like, "Oh my gosh, that's crazy," but to the audience, it was geared towards that audience and getting those voters out, and it seemed to have worked. I mean, look at Virginia. I mean, how close he got in Virginia and New Jersey, for crying out loud.
Yeah, in particular, he brought a lot of voters who don't normally vote out to vote.
Yep.
And at the same token, I think he got a lot of people who would normally have gone Democratic, the union members, African Americans, and Hispanic voters. He did very well with Hispanic voters. I think his down-to-earth appeal in that regard served him well.
And it's sort of, and it was really, that's why I was sort of looking at it. It was interesting because of appealing in the way he sort of targeted and going to places that you normally wouldn't go to, which sort of was Reagan-esque. Like, Reagan would go to Detroit or go to some places.
Well,
and he went to New York City,
Madison
to Harlem.
Madison Square Garden, Harlem. He went to Virginia.
Yep.
A little bit of an appeal to North Carolina, but he went to Virginia, and he just not just to pull the chain of the Democrats, but because he thought he would actually have some effect.
And it's sort of interesting when he ran. I forget what the first time, I guess, and he was saying he was going to make Mexico pay for the wall.
That was 2016.
And I would meet with people and have dinner with, or different. I call them family. That now live in Texas. But I'd say, he's saying that, but that's not going to happen. And they would say, we know it's not going to happen. And so if he doesn't make Mexico pay for the wall, it's not upsetting to us. But the thought process is it shouldn't always just be we're going to do it ourselves. That we would expect. He's going the mindset that make others do something, like the NATO thing, making NATO pay for itself, pay for more of its defense.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, and you and I were talking way back then, it just was like, oh my gosh, he's anti-NATO. He's going to get out of NATO. And now you have loads of countries are paying more towards the share. And the head of France was like, yeah, that's right. We should be paying our equal share. And it's sort of a difference, and that I don't think he got credit for in 2016. But it's sort of by this time, it's really weird how it's like the norm by some of these countries.
Well, I think he uses, for instance, the tariffs.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's a bargaining chip. I don't think he really intends to slap massive tariffs on imported goods. It would be an economic disaster. At the same token, he is using it as I can do this, and I will. So I need some concessions.
Right. And he sort of did it. In fact, some of his tariffs Biden kept in place on China, I think, was one of them.
Yes, that's right.
But I agree. And it's sort of, and you and I we go far back, and we've talked about tariffs before, but I'm older, and I'm sort of like the Henry Clay, McKinley, Garfield mindset that tariffs aren't evil. And I like the idea of a country being self-sufficient. And I think COVID really showed that some of the medicine we had to get from China. And some of our basic things we had to get from other countries. And there was distribution issues and all that because of COVID. And I'm sitting there going, well, that's why you want to be self-sufficient anyways. But with the tariff thing, I went and bought an American car. Now I could have gone and bought a car made overseas, or when I bought a dishwasher, it was American. It was built in Alabama.
Now my Toyota was built in Marysville, Ohio.
Right, and so the mentality would be, if I wanted to buy something made overseas, I would be paying more. But if I want to buy American, I'm not paying that much more. So I find that interesting. There is the theoretical that if you put a tariff and you raise the price of that dishwasher from, I'll say $250 to the European one is $500, then these people go up to $450 because you'll still buy it, and that will drive some prices up. And that's what happened in earlier in the 30s. But it didn't always happen that way. But so I understand that problem.
Smoot Hawley tariff.
Yes.
Yes.
But that's sort of interesting. So, do we want to jump into congressional elections and get into?
Well, actually, I was going to say if I could.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
Yeah. What I'm curious about is what's going to happen to the Democratic Party and to the Democrats are kind of shell shocked. I think their resolve to come back and fight is there. They're trying to figure out how to do that. They came out of this election. Not expecting to win. They didn't do as badly as all that with the legislative elections. I mean, there are 3 votes out in the Senate. That's better than some people expected. The House is extremely narrow.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at it, it wasn't. It was a wipeout, but it wasn't a wipeout. And the presidency, they lost it. But I think there's one question I want to see answered before the 26 midterms, which are going to be very important, and it'll be a real referendum on. Well, midterms generally go against the White House.
Yep.
It's just kind of the way it goes. But the Democrats have to be able to mount some kind of formidable campaign, or they don't, or the midterms don't count. 2002, George Bush, the Republican Party actually did better in the midterms. Trump would love a repeat of that.
Yep, and Biden did better in his midterm.
Yes, he did. It was better than expected.
Right.
I remember that was the headline in the Washington Post. And so my point is that I want to see if the Democrats can rally again, and if they are willing to maybe look at their message again, be more middle.
Right.
We'll talk about the Abigail Spanberger, what have you, in a bit, but she has managed, because she has managed to find a middle ground. She's done very well, winning 2, 3, 4 elections. Are the Democrats willing to to embrace that on a national scale when it comes to running for the House of Representatives being the key focus.
Well, and right in the Senate, but it's interesting because they are having this sort of civil war about it, because some of them are saying we need to keep being on the left, and pushing the left agenda, and others are saying what you're saying is go to the middle and remember it, and try to pull it. And you're right, they haven't yet decided which way they want to go, so that will be an interesting fight. I mean, there was the issue that somebody, either a staffer or a Congress member or somebody, made a video after Cyber Monday making fun of people. He's like saying, well, I guess there is no inflation because Thanksgiving shopping was high, Black Friday shopping went up, and Cyber Monday went up. So I guess people aren't really upset with the economy. And they ended up pulling it down because people are like, that's tone deaf. People buy on those holidays because I know when we had less money, I purposely bought on those days because the deals were better.
Yeah, the sales are on.
Yeah. So that's not that the economy is doing great for me at that time. It was like, that's better deals for me to buy X number of items. So they ended up pulling that down. So I think there is this tension in the party of which way they want to go, and it's up to them to figure out which way they're going to go.
And the Democratic Party is that big tent. There's moderates and there's liberals, and somehow they're going to have to learn to live with each other, and they're going to have to decide whether it's more important to win or more important to be ideologically pure.
Yep. Both parties have that fight.
Yes, very much so.
My students who are doing a mock election, they're having that problem right now, different classes, because they made platforms that were to either to the right or to the left, and they're finding that most of the students are in the middle, and so you have to renounce their planks and move to the middle or go down in flames because they believe in their ideas. And I'm like, yes, welcome to the real world.
That's a great exercise.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Well, you do this. You've done the same thing.
Yes, I have, but not as creatively as that.
Oh, thank you. When
it comes to developing a party platform, and they've nailed it.
Yep.
The American public is moderate. It's and the whole business of identity politics too. That just if you want to alienate I hate to sound like a British person, but the working class, but the union members, a lot of African Americans, and a lot of Hispanic voters, you go after identity politics, LGBTQ, and you oversell that as part of your platform, and it alienates voters.
Right. And
And by the way, I am completely in favor of fairness towards LGBTQ. I just think that perhaps the Democratic Party pressed that too hard in the election and alienated a core voter component of their base.
Well, and it sort of goes, if you can't put food on the table, or you're worried about putting food on the table, then those issues are not as important, as is saying somebody's a threat to democracy isn't important. Those are people who study history know that most of the dictators who do come up to power, Mussolini, Hitler, etc., happen when the economy's bad, because people are more concerned about their family being able to be fed and clothed and etc., and have a job than they are worried about freedom of press or freedom of speech. And so historically, that's always been the case. And so again, going down the hitting the line of either the social issues or that Trump's is a dictator, he's going to take your rights away from you, and you're like, I don't have food, I'm working 3 jobs,
and that's I've come across a lot of people, and teachers especially, which will probably feed into another topic in a minute, who work that second job, and so you're up at the crack of dawn, teach till 2:30, 3, and then you're off to do another job, or you have a weekend job.
Yes.
And so, what are you most concerned about?
That's right. And to give him credit again, I don't want to be the Trump spokesman here, but he was the first one that said no tax on tips, and that hits exactly the level workers you're talking about, or overtime. The aspect of overtime. Now that would be a little harder to figure out, but the tip one is fairly straightforward to do on your own income tax and the company's income tax. And he was the first one that said it. when nobody had said it before. And so if you are one of those people working one or two jobs and you're working as a waitress or et cetera, or waiter or whatever, and you get tips, then you've just gotten more money in your wallet, which was very smart. And in the grand scheme of the tax rates and tax cuts and stuff, it'll be some, but it's not as large of a.
I remember when they started going after tips.
Yes.
And it seems so desperately unfair.
Yep.
People who are working less than minimum wage as servers and having to pay taxes on the tips they get for the largesse or the goodwill of the customers. It's a hard way to make a living.
Yes, it really is. So we've talked a little bit about Congress. Anything particular about Virginia and the congressional races?
Well, the second district, and I'll tell you how fast these things go. I've already forgotten the lady's name who ran in that seat. If it had been a Democratic night, that would have gone. That might have switched. I think the 7th district. I wasn't sure how that was going to go.
That 7th is our area, by the way.
Right. The 7th includes sort of the I-95 corridor going west, and by the way, all the way south to a little chunk of Albemarle.
Yes.
So it's a big district, but most of the voters, most of the voters live along the I-95 corridor, particularly around Manassas, and the new district is demographically drawn to be competitive. And the last two elections with Abigail Spanberger in 22 and now Eugene Bindeman in 24 is gone Democratic. What has surprised me in both elections is how, we'll talk probably about this a bit, we get into Stafford politics, was how Stafford, it didn't go for Bindeman, but it was a hair's breadth away from going for Bindeman. And I really didn't expect he would do as well. He's a very bright guy, former lieutenant colonel in the Army, an immigrant from the Soviet Union, compelling all-American boy, and the immigrant story. I was surprised he did as well as he did in Stafford, and he did phenomenally well in Manassas. And he was running against a hometown boy, Derek Anderson, who's from Spotsylvania, and was a very competent candidate. He was. I will say this: he was amazingly outspent by Bindeman. I mean, maybe a little less so when the final numbers come in, but it was about 10-1, and so they bucked the trend by some heavy-duty spending, well, anyway, it was kind of for Virginia Democrats. It was a bright spot on a kind of a dark night because overall the trend in Virginia had been a slight shift to the right. Not a tremendous shift, but where they were hoping for like a 10% margin, they ended up with more like a 5% margin, and that's getting close.
Right. And it was what sort of was interesting is both Vindman and Anderson, there was all sorts of negative things being thrown back and forth and about their military careers and this, that, and the other, and having a commercial which made it look like you didn't have your real family, and
that was a bit weird.
And it could have just been one sentence in there that said, I'm here with these average voters, or that would have just killed the whole story. But they didn't. So, but that's what happens in life. You make a little
in
faux pas.
I really don't think he was coming up with a pretend family.
No,
but he liked the picture.
Right, and it's
and
you
then,
do that.
And then when you say this, it's not your family. It's like, oh, this is embarrassing.
Right. And so
I'm not sure that the election turned on that.
I think it added to some of it. I mean, it was. And it was
Benjamin actually had a pretty good margin.
Yeah.
So I don't think that really turned it. I think Benjamin outspent his opponent.
Yeah, definitely.
And frankly, it helped carry. It helped. He's. I don't know what kind of congressman he's going to be. Will he be a middle of the road type like Spanberger, who was very good at working across the aisle? Or will he join the caucus and do everything they tell him to do? He doesn't seem to be the type that does what people tell him to do. That could be good. We're just going to have to see, because he'll be up for election again in the midterms.
And it's in our district, when we used to be part of the first and we had Whitman, Whitman would vote against government shutdowns because he knew a large chunk of his district.
He's very reliable in that, yes.
And so we're not the district, the lower part when it was the first could be a little bit more to the right, but a large chunk of it wasn't. So you're right. It'll be interesting to see how he plays this area and because, and makes his decisions and what he's going to do.
I do think he ran in effect. Look, you have money, you spend it, you win. That's politics. Usually
didn't work for Kamala, but yeah.
Yeah, but it worked for Vindman. And the question is, will he craft enough of an identity for himself in the next 2 years to actually be able to pull this off, and without the entire focus of the world on him?
Right.
Excuse me.
So looking back we're ending the Trump administration, and we know history changes over time. Eisenhower left office, didn't look well. Now he's moved upward. Even George W. Bush has moved upwards. There's some people moving Clinton upward. Wilson, as we know, went downward. So what are our preliminary feelings about the Biden administration? And then we'll get into the incoming Trump administration and the cabinet.
I think Biden might come out a little better than he left. That's not unusual.
He hasn't left yet, by the way.
I know. Until January the 20th at noon. And
but if we watch the news, it's like, yes.
Oh, well, let's face it. When you've got 6 weeks to go, or 5 weeks to go, you're as lame a duck as you're going to get. And I think that he's the Infrastructure Act was very, very successful. Frankly, I think that will be something of a legacy. I agree the Republicans will take credit for it. Because, well, a lot of the shovels will be stuck in the ground during the Trump administration. So that'll be some benefit. Also, he really would have been better off had he been the transition president. Had he not chosen to run for re-election, I think that would have put him in a much better light. He said, look, I said I would come in here. I'd go through, get us out of the turmoil of the first Trump administration. I'd smooth us into the next administration, who he certainly would hope would be a Democrat, and then retire. I think history would have treated him a lot better, or will treat him a lot better had he done that. Would have treated him a lot better had he done that. Unfortunately, he's going to be defined by the fact that he ran and really wasn't up to running again.
Well, and it's interesting. You mentioned at the beginning of when he ran in 20, it was, I'm going to be a transitional president. And then there were reports in the Post and other various news networks that he met with Doris Kuhn Goodwin and Brinkley, the historians, and they talked him into saying that you could be transformational. And so he shifted from being a transitional to trying to be like FDR and LBJ. And that it's really bad to do that when you only have a 50-50 Senate and basically a 50-50 House and then eventually a Republican House. That's sort of a word to the wise to the Trump people. That you
FDR and Johnson had massive majorities in both houses,
and you could do loads of things, but he couldn't. And then he turned around and when people like Mitt Romney would be against some of his grand ideas. Those British say schemes, and they don't mean it as in a nasty thing.
No, they
Americans we do, but
you have a health scheme.
Yes, right. Yes, and I was watching a British thing, and I saw them say scheme, so that's why it stuck there. But Romney said he was going to go for it, and the next thing Biden was saying, all these MAGA people against me, and Romney is nowhere a MAGA person. And
that's for sure.
So it didn't unite. It didn't divide.
He voted to impeach the president. He voted to impeach.
Probably. Yeah. Yes, he did. Yeah, he probably voted for Kamala, but like the
I don't know if he can vote for a Democrat.
well, yeah, I think so the infrastructure bill in the Washington Post, I followed it, and it was the Democrats in the Senate and the Republicans in the Senate were working on the bill, and there were quotes from members saying we're purposely not talking to the White House until we already have the bill done. And it's several of the major things that people are saying this are going to be his legacy, were things that Congress were like, we need to get it done, and then we'll give it to you, type thing. And now there's sort of been it's a twist on, you know, Obamacare and the Trump administration and a little bit of W's administration where they got out and said, I believe I want to do X, and they leave Congress to come up with it. But it's sort of what presidents have been doing since at least W, where they say, you know, where the Reagan tax cuts, it was like Reagan came up with tax cuts, and then they worked with Congress to make it. Whereas, at least starting with W, if not Clinton, the mindset has been, well, I want to have such and such, and then I'll leave Congress to make it work. And they don't really push it. So I agree with you. I think I said a year or so ago that the Biden administration or the Biden presidency was going to be viewed not like Wilson's final year, or more like Grover Cleveland's, where the staff protected him when Grover Cleveland had cancer. Terrific book. The President is a Very Sick Man, about Grover Cleveland. He had cancer of the jaw, and the country was going through a Great Depression, one of the first depressions. And so they didn't want to tell the public the president had cancer because people would be so upset, and they already were upset. And so he had half his jaw removed on a yacht in between Long Island Sound and Connecticut in the middle of the night. And then he convalesced in Newport News, and then went back to Washington with his rubber thing in his mouth to be his jaw. But the staff would never tell anybody. And they're like, why does the president lose weight? Well, no, I don't see any weight. You know, it was really, it's an interesting, but that sort of goes to the Biden thing where it had to be obvious for people that he wasn't up for it. And yet they didn't.
Well,
really
that first
push it.
debate.
Right. And that's whoever pushed him to do that was doing that for the party because that made everybody see it.
Yeah.
Well, and then the pardon is just not going to go over well. And if he does preemptive pardons, that's just not going to help.
Well,
his record and his history.
I would say that Donald Trump has a long history of preemptive pardons.
Oh, I agree. But
I mean, it's.
But George Washington doesn't.
I know.
Who do you want to be compared to, David?
I agree, but it's done.
Yeah. I mean, and you could understand doing it for your son.
I probably would have done it.
But you don't give the speech or write the thing that says the Justice Department is going after my son which is now being used by the Trump people in their cases. Maybe that wasn't the best of plans to do that. So any thoughts about the Trump cabinet picks?
Well, I frankly sometimes don't know where he's coming from. I know he wants people who are loyal to him and who have a grasp of his concept. Matt Gaetz, I'm afraid, was the first casualty, and that was if you're going to pick somebody to be a attorney general, it would pay to vet them first, to at least call their former employers to hire. If Trump doesn't trust the FBI to do the background investigation, hire your own private investigators.
Yeah,
it was an utter disaster. And that's the top law enforcement officer of the country. And some people say that was a kind of a throwaway, so you could deflect attention to Gates and then by have somebody like Pete Hegseth, be more successful in getting his nomination through. It's curious that most of the opposition to the potential opposition to the Trump nominees isn't coming from the Democrats. It's coming from the Republicans. Gates was torpedoed by the Republicans. I think Hegseth is probably going to succeed. He got Joni Ernst to back him, or at least not to oppose him. It's just I know he wants people to shake up Washington. Fair enough. It might be helpful to have had some people who had some knowledge of Washington in the process. Otherwise, the deep state's going to roll over you like nobody's business.
Like they did first term.
Yeah, and so if you nominate people who aren't competent, they can't negotiate the process.
Right.
You can't reform Washington by just writing a memo.
Yes. Well, the interesting thing, and I think I get where he's coming from. He wants people who can go out and articulate and go on and be the face for it and be out on the news and doing it. His nominee for Homeland Security, for example, is out there on many different channels pushing, what they're saying, pushing the policy. If you look at what he found out in the first term was that some of the people he was told you should pick were not good at that. And if you look at the Biden administration, that's been one of the failings of the Biden administration, I think, is you never really saw members of his administration out there forcefully on every network advocating for him. And even now at the tail end when he's starting to do his his legacy speeches, you don't see anybody on his, in his administration coming out and doing it for him or with him. And that's unfortunate. So I think my feeling is that Trump's attitude is, I want people who are going to be good on television, be able to handle the bantering, the arguing with hostile media, and we can bring in people in the lower levels that are appointees, some of whom don't even get confirmed by the Senate.
That's true.
Who know the system, who can get things done.
The 9 on 3,000 of them.
So that I don't know. I don't have any insight into what they're doing, but it just seems as though everybody's picking is really good at the public speaking aspect of it, which I think is that way. He's not out there. His new chief of staff is just phenomenal. She's keeping him not out on X, I guess it's now. He's not out on the news every day. He's not
Twitter, formerly known.
Yeah,
No,
X formerly known as Twitter. It's sort of he's far more focused on things. She did that well in the campaign, except for when he's out in front of a microphone, and he plays to the crowd, which loads of politicians do. But she's really done a good job pulling him in so he's more focused, which is very interesting. And that was one of his foibles in the first 4 years.
Yes,
was just being out all the time, and
I do think you need a certain degree of competence if you're going to deal with the level of, for instance, with the Department of Defense. You're going to be dealing with a very powerful, very committed department. $900 billion, more than any country in the world spends on defense. And in fact, just about more than any of the top 23 countries spend on defense combined. And it's complicated. It is incredibly complicated. I worked at DoD for 5 years, and I can tell you that it is just working in the low rungs of the organization. It's incredibly complicated. The planning, the issues regarding force structure, recruitment, equipage, future stresses, future requirements, where the war is going to be in the future.
Oh yeah,
and you can't really just come off of television and go and run a department that big, or with a mission as incredibly significant as that.
And what I'm hearing from people who voted for Trump and across the spectrum, Republicans and independents and some Democrats, is with the Hegseth pick, is questioning his judgment, not Trump's, but Hegseth. Number one, he's got a family. So you have to have known that the different things were going to pop up. And so you're putting your family through all that. You knew you signed a non-disclosure agreement. And so that had to come out because it was, it's a legal document. And there were reports on different news networks that he didn't tell Trump or the transition team about that. That's a question of judgment. The drinking issue is a question of judgment. And
the Veterans Associations here.
Yep.
Yeah.
And even if there's he says he doesn't have a drinking problem, but then it was reported again by Newton, it hasn't been refuted, that he told one senator he won't drink anything while he's Secretary of Defense.
That sounds like a classic alcoholic's response.
Or was John Tower being offered for defense?
Yes, he was.
So, but the larger one that people keep pointing to me is, you wanted this position because you want to help promote Trump's policies. And yet, everything right now is on you as a person. When you go to the hearing, it's not going to be on what Trump wants to do. Other than getting rid of DEI, there's very little we know what Trump wants to do in the Defense Department because it's all on him. And this was what some people said was the problem with Clinton when the Monica thing erupted, was if you cared about the issues, if they are more important than the person, so the person should step back and say, okay, I'm gone because the issues are more important. Same with Hagsworth. If you care about what Trump wants to do with the Defense Department, then did you see how quickly people are like, yes, if it's DeSantis, and they started shifting to policy, not personality. And so that I think is your point. That's what I'm hearing from people is they're like, yeah, that's just not, they may not like Mehmet Oz, but they understand it. They may not be happy with Tulsi Gabbard, but they understand it. But, some of it is like, yeah, the bigger picture here is the policies.
Yeah, and that's and some of these people come from some very strange policy orientations, strange by any standard. Robert Kennedy, that one is, I still don't understand that one. I don't. I think Kennedy is. Let's see. He's sort of. I don't want to say he's pro-abortion, but he's certainly pro-choice. He has some very, very strange views on vaccines. I always like to point out that the average service member of the armed forces, has 17 vaccines before he usually ends his tour. So it's like, we've put a lot of faith in vaccines for a long time, and I think fluoride in the water has probably been a good thing. I don't have any cavities, so I just give you.
Yeah,
and again, he hasn't had any experience running a large organization, and that's.
But again, if you hire people beneath you, if I put David Kerr underneath me, I can go out and talk whatever I want because I know David Kerr is going to run it well, and knows the system and knows how to do it. I'm not putting your name in for anything. I'm just giving you an example.
Good. I don't think I'd be a good fit with this administration.
So it's interesting, and I also think what's interesting is, for example, on the immigration front, during the campaign, the thing was there's going to be mass deportations of everybody. But since the election, it's been no, it's going to be people who have been convicted of a crime here, or people who had their judicial process, and the judges have said you don't have any right to be here. So it's not everybody; it is a narrow line of grouping of people, which is pretty savvy. That's we're not going. Because at the rallies, we're going to take everybody back. But so far, he's saying no. We're only looking at these two groups. And I'm not hearing pushback from the people who voted for him saying, no, you said everybody, and this isn't fair. I mean, it's interesting how it got winnowed down to groups that have had their rights and had their day in courts and lost. Mm-hmm. And so it's that's an interesting twist on the policy.
Oh, it is, and it's sort of a retrenchment actually, because I know friends of mine who voted for Trump. Desperately wanted the mass deportation, and I think they might be a little disappointed when it doesn't come about. I think they're actually going to feel a little bit let down because that was probably, if there was an issue that besides the ones we discussed earlier that really decided this election, it was the migrant crisis, and frankly, Donald Trump directly addressed it.
Yeah.
And he gave a sweeping solution. He was going to use extensive resources on the part of the Department of Defense. He was going to massively increase the Border Patrol. And if not the wall, he was certainly going to make the Texas border much more secure. And right now he's working very closely with or he will be working very closely with Governor Abbott of Texas to kind of create a model deportation program.
Right. I mean, again, it's not everybody. It's winnowed so that it's not. What I'm sort of saying is that made sense. It may have, and I don't know. It may go to larger groups. But if you've like he's already worked with the president of Mexico, and they're working to stop people from coming up through Mexico, and you're already having interactions with them. You're working with Trudeau about our northern border to do something. And the only people you're really going to target are people who had their day in court and were found that they didn't have a legal right to be here, or they've committed crimes. And you're not going to go after everybody. It's an interesting, and then he will have done something about the border, but not done rounding up every single person that's here illegally, which is an interesting twist. And again, and I don't know about your friends, but if the people who were going, 8 years ago saying Mexico's going to pay for the wall, but I know they're not. I'm okay with that, but he's doing something about it. It's interesting. I don't know how it will play out, but it'll be interesting to look at.
I think a lot of the people that I know who voted for Trump on this issue, now playing devil's advocate here, would say, by being in this country illegally, you have broken the law. Mm-hmm. Your presumption of it is a law. It is a major violation, and you're subject to immediate deportation. And they would say, what part of what law can I break and get away with?
Right, and we'll see. And I agree. That's sort of the dichotomy about this, which is why I was really surprised it went from that to that. Mm-hmm. So we're like, the one thing, we'll go back to a historical thing. Most presidents, at least in our lifetime, their second terms have not been as successful as their first. So I'm really interested, and I had a student say the same thing. He was thinking the same thing. Because it's not consecutive, will it be different? Because the only one we have is Grover Cleveland, and he had that massive depression. So that's not, but is it going to be that the second time he's a lame duck at day one, and so therefore, or is it I've learned the lessons from the first one, and I'm going to do things better? We don't know. And I have to say, as a historian and a government dork, I'm really interested in that to see if that's a recipe for success or not.
I would be very interested to see if he can actually learn from his prior mistakes. He doesn't seem to do that well. I'm all for the good of the country. I want him to be successful, but I don't know whether the break in terms is going to make a difference in how he behaves.
Right. Well, and that'll be interesting to see if one way or the other. I think so far not being out on the news every day, not doing this, picking people who he knows can advocate publicly for his policies and et cetera, that's a difference. So he has learned from some of those things. Mm-hmm. The campaign, targeting, listening to people to target certain groups was different. Listening to his son and going on, podcasts like this. He didn't come on ours, but he should. People should
have invited him.
He should. People should come on us. But that's different. So I agree. It'll be interesting to see if he's learned, if he pivots, which is a COVID lovely phrase, pivot. So that'll be interesting to see. And that's one of the things I'm sort of looking at is, does it make a difference? And is that what people should really think about doing in the future or not? I don't know. It says a government dork. I just find that interesting.
Is this, summarizing your point, is this a second term or is this a brand new term?
Right. And it'll be different. And so I don't know. And I just find that really fascinating that way. Anything you want to say about Doge?
I don't know what to make of it just yet. It's a advisory commission. It doesn't really have any power. That doesn't mean I don't think that perhaps it shouldn't have sway. It's going to be so much of what they want. When you mess with regulations, you're also dealing with the whole process of how they were created in the first place, which is that they're written, they're put out for public comment, there's a notice of preliminary rulemaking, and then they're adopted. I mean, it's not just some bureaucrat sitting in a room. There's a very elaborate process of commentary and rewriting and writing the regulation in the process. I don't think that either Ramaswamy or Musk really understand that it's not just a matter of taking a pen and wiping out the regulations. Right. Also, they have this little thing called Congress, which is it's got interest, and you can't especially Republicans, since they're in control, you can't unilaterally assume they're going to behave and instantly go along with the president, because they're not going to. They're a very independent bunch.
As we see with defense budgets.
Yes.
Well, it's sort of interesting because every president from Nixon on has said they want to either reform, realign, cut back, whatever. They all use different terms. But every single one that's run for president since 68 has said they want to do, reform, which never means more. It always is theory means less or better run. But you're right. If Congress created an agency like the Education Department, it can't be wiped out by anything but Congress. And the Democrats in the Senate will filibuster that.
Even though I'm going to be harsh, I'm sure this does not agree with my folks in my party, but I have very little faith in the Department of Education. I don't think it does anything. And it dates back to 1979 or 80.
No, Jimmy Carter did it 77, 78. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really don't see that it's made a contribution. Most policy for, as you well know, having been a member of the Board of Supervisors, most policy for schools comes from the state and local level. Most money, in fact, in our case, just about all of our money comes from the state and local level.
Yep.
And what contribution there is from the Department of Education in terms of standards, I'm not exactly clear.
Letters can be sent to David Kerr at I get where you're coming from. So a couple things, I agree.
I would probably find myself in agreement with the president on that one.
And it used to be health, education, and welfare, and it blocked off because, as so often happens, Jimmy Carter promised the teachers unions, if they helped him in the 76 campaign, he would create a Department of Education, and so we got that. Reagan said if he won, he'd make it Veterans of Affairs,
and he did.
And he did. So it is often that way. And if Congress makes it, it's very hard to do it. Two quickies. We both know somebody. I won't give his name, but he worked as not as a government appointee, but a GS, passed the civil service exam in a department, and when the Trump people were in, they put in some different policies, regulations, interpretations. Biden's people came in and said, throw them all away. And he and his workers said, no, these are working. These are good policies. And they said, no, anything that Trump had his hands on, we want gone. He ultimately left the bureaucracy because he was so disgusted at what they were doing, because it was like, so there's some regulations, and interpretations that they'll have a little bit of sway over. But the second thing that really kills, you're right, Congress fiddles the law, messy as it is, fiddles. But the next one is the media. As well as I do. I was not aware of things under Nixon that much because I was a little baby. But under Reagan, there would be these, and then Bush, and then Clinton, and then Obama. There'd be all these articles about this is how bad the national debt is, and this is how it's going to impact your children for eternity and your grandchildren. This is what this is what's going to happen, and there'd be all these news articles about that. And then as soon as any president or anybody says let's cut X, then there are loads of stories about here's little Susie Stockenwacker, who she's going to lose this if we do that. Yesterday, listening to my classical music on the way home, they had the news, National Public Radio, had a clip on there about a program that was part of the COVID act that Biden got through Congress. I'm blacking out on the name of it. But the people along the Colorado River get paid not to use water.
That's right.
And they had people talking that if I don't get the money, there's no incentive. I'm going to go back to using water. And I'm like, and they're saying how much they care about the Colorado River and they love the water and But then unless you pay me, I'm going to do it. And so we're already getting the news stories that if you don't keep giving these people the money, then this is going to happen. But there certainly is. Bill Maher, who's very, very much on the left, many years ago pointed out that people can receive unemployment, which means that you can't get a job, but you can't find one, and disability, which means that you can't physically do a job. You can get both checks. And his attitude was, that's irrational. That's illogical. And I have long, as we won a few times, I give my grand opinion. I've long felt that if you believe in the social programs, you want them clean as Caesar's wife. And if you believe in the Defense Department, you want it as clean as Caesar's wife. So if the Defense Department is failing, 8 audits in a row, if you care about the Defense Department, you want it to clean its act up. Because that if they can't find millions of dollars or billions of dollars, there's something wrong there, and you want to fix that. And if there's programs, if you believe in the social programs and these safety nets, make them right. But politicians won't, because if I admit that there's a problem in this one, and that's my pet one, then the other party will attack me and attack that program and try to wipe it out, instead of everybody just saying let's make it better. So it's a continual problem, but we'll see if this one works, where everyone since 68 has not, or 69 when Nixon came in. And
Ronald Reagan also had a commission for reform of government.
And W and Clinton and Obama.
Oh, yes.
And everybody, when I'm talking about those elections, it's sort of everyone runs for different kind of things, and one of it is for efficient government. They may call it a different thing, but they all ran for that. So it's just really an interesting think about the era of divided government that the books say we're in. All right, so do you want to move to state and local?
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
2025. We finally moved
Why
into a new year.
Yes.
What is this, 3 hours?
We have an election every year in Virginia.
Yes, we do.
I mean, we get no breaks. North Carolina gets a break. Georgia gets a break. We have a whole statewide election House of Delegates, State Senate, every year.
Yep.
And we've got in Stafford, we've got, of course, there's the statewide elections
governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general.
That's right. And then we've got the House of Delegates. Mm-hmm. And right now, the House of Delegates and the State Senate. The State Senate's not up, so it doesn't matter. It's 21-19, so the Democrats have a 1-vote majority. Mm-hmm. And it's 51-49
I think so,
in the House of Delegates, Democratic majority.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, if Josh Cole were to lose his seat, it would tip the balance of power, and assuming nobody else lost, it would have to be a power sharing agreement.
Yes.
So a lot of these local races are going to matter. Anything that was close is going to matter.
Yep. So if we start with governor, we'll have Winsome Sears as the Republican, and Abigail Spanberger is the Democrat. They both did a very effective job of clearing their path. So they're, as far as I know, right now, there's nobody challenging them.
Neither one.
So that's very effective on their part. So they can unite their party.
I'm a little surprised that Winsome Sears was able to clear the path so easily. I guess I just didn't give her credit for her political savvy, since I still have the image of her with the M16, and it's like, okay, and being kind of fringy.
Well, I've seen her at different events when the governor came to Stafford High School about anti-fentanyl, and she was there, and she can work a room very, very well. She's a very good, and I've heard this from other people who've seen her in other venues, very good retail politician. And she's very good at remembering people and things of that nature. And she's very personable and very outgoing, and she's very good working room. I've seen Spanberger the same way at different events.
Oh, yes.
And she's excellent the same way as well. So it's going to be an interesting race. First time in Virginia, you'll have 2 women against each other. So
I asked a question at the start of my state and local government class when you get to the executive. Who was the first woman governor of Virginia? And, well, they all get it right eventually after a few minutes of cogitation, figuring it's a trick question, which it is. And it's like, there's never been a woman governor of Virginia. And so no matter what, we're going to have one.
Right.
Just as you said.
And it'll be interesting because who will probably win the state, and I'll see what you think, is the one that doesn't go farther to the extreme.
Oh, definitely.
And they don't have to in a primary, but it's where you're saying where, Spanberger has been, center left. And it'll be interesting if Sears follows the Youngkin model of being center right, and then it'll be about turnout.
It'll be about turning out your base, and it's also there's that old. I don't want to sound like the past is always prelude, but
Yes, thank you.
the fact is that Virginia has almost never, with one exception, that was Terry McAuliffe, when Republicans ran the only candidate who he could beat against him, Ken Cuccinelli, and but other than that, since 1969, there has never been a candidate of the party in the White House win the governorship.
Right.
And that's a long time.
It is. And so since Trump will be in the White House, that bodes well for Spanberger, because that just seems to be what happens in Virginia. So that'll be interesting. The delegates, because the districts, the way they're cut up, I mean, in our area, we have Paul Milday in the northern end of the county.
He's safe.
He's safe. I haven't heard anybody who's being tossed. I think I've heard some names, but they're still trying to get them to run against them. And Josh Cole, who has the city, a little bit of Spotsy, and then Falmouth and George Washington district, he should be safe too. I haven't heard any. I've heard some names bantied, but I don't see that either of those.
And
there's nobody's jumping forward as like the normal person that you would think would run in either district.
And frankly, at this point, the campaign, which is already just a few months away, it's 11 months away, give or take.
Right.
And you would expect somebody to have already stepped out and started campaigning.
Yes.
One thing about Josh Cole was that he was campaigning from day one. And when he lost the election, he just kept campaigning. He was like, "Oh, I lost. Okay. Hi, my name is Josh Cole. I'm running for House of Delegates."
And it's now the Milday and Cole cannot campaign during the legislative session. So
That's
January
right.
to February 22nd, I think it is. So somebody else, if they were out there, they could be doing stuff. But going back up statewide, Minores, I never say his name right. Miares.
Jason
Miares.
Miares.
Okay. He's going to be. I haven't heard of anybody challenging him for the Republican for Attorney General, but who's on the Democratic side?
I can't. I came with a list.
Yay! I was hoping you would do your homework because you're awesome that way.
Because I just did. I'll tell you the truth. I'll tell all your viewers the truth. I didn't know who was running for all these seats. And let's see, we've got Winston Sears and Abigail Spanberger for governor. For lieutenant governor, which is the job of the lieutenant governor is to go and check the governor's pulse every morning.
and vote in ties.
Vote in ties. And,
they run the Senate too, to a certain degree.
Well,
yeah.
When they
theoretically,
President Pro Tem probably does that, or they appoint somebody. But we got Barber Lateef for the Democrats. He's from Northern Virginia, and Barber.
Oh, Barbara. Yeah, Barbara. She's a female, I think.
No, Barber.
Barber. Okay.
He's a man.
Okay.
So like I said, these are new names.
Okay.
Don't be surprised. Senator Aaron Rouse wants to run, and Mayor of Richmond, LeVar Stoney.
Yep.
Who would be an interesting choice. I say that exactly with how that the tone was meant to be. And then John Reed, he had host one of the state's most popular morning programs, Richmond Morning News. He wants to be the Republican nominee for lieutenant governor. And for attorney general, we have Jay Jones, a state senator, former NFL ball player. That can't hurt. And then Shannon Taylor, she's the Henrico County Commonwealth's attorney. If I were to, on the attorney general nomination, I would probably, Jay Jones is a very compelling, likable guy, but Shannon Taylor is a hard-nosed prosecuting attorney. And frankly, for attorney general, I think you want that.
I had heard of John Reed. There was somebody else. He's a radio guy. Dang. There was somebody else that was being talked about. There's two other people that I'm thinking about it, but they haven't definitively said they're going to run for lieutenant governor yet.
And again, now would be a good time to start.
Yes. I know that during the session you can't so much, but you would think you'd take care of, after the November election, you'd take care of, use um, the end of November into December to really just get your name out there and go to committee meetings and things of that nature.
Yeah, nothing stops you from just visiting.
Right.
Hi, I'm not necessarily running for anything, but I am, say so-and-so, state senator
Yes.
so-and-so, and how you doing?
Yep. Well, it'll be interesting because I think
My areas.
the logic is that the head of the ticket brings in the other two people.
And it tends to...
And that tends to happen. But we have had idiosyncrasies where the Republican has won for Attorney General. I think McDonald won one
yes,
year.
he did.
So I could see Jason M. Being able to hold his own, especially some of the issues he has taken up in different parts of the state, helping bring out that vote. I mean, for example, up in Loudoun County, he may do better in Loudoun County than somebody else would do, because he's been there for the parents, and the parents in school issues are very passionate and out and about. So that he may be in a better position than if it,
Well, I think that both...
If I decided to run for, and I'm not ever going to run for Attorney General, but I wouldn't do as well. But he's picked issues and picked things that there is a base of support for. And so I think he's done a very good job on that.
Well, I would say that one thing that I don't think that either of his Democratic opponents expected him to be to be an incumbent.
Mm-hmm.
I think they both saw him as going for governor, and then a big fight with Winsome Earl Sears, and then those two positions, Lieutenant Governor and Attorney General, open.
Yes.
And so I think they're kind of like, oh dear, now we have to run against an incumbent who has at least managed some popularity.
Yes, and he'll have deep pockets, and I think Sears and he do well with being tied with Youngkin. With Youngkin's database abilities is what he's done. I think where we were talking about earlier, way back when, about Harris not divorcing herself from the Biden administration. Generally speaking, people are pretty happy with Youngkin, and so that will be helpful for them. So that'll be, but that will be interesting. We have basically 11 months to almost 12 months to go.
Oh yeah, it's going to be. Well, these nominees, they're going to be. I gather that the Democrats want to do a primary.
Oh, okay.
So
good. Oh, that's good. Gives students an availability to work on their campaigns in the spring. Okay.
Spoken like a true government teacher.
And we've already said that there's no real surprises as far as delegates go.
No.
I haven't heard anybody substantive coming out of the woodwork to run against either Milday or Cole. Not saying that somebody won't be found, but again, those will be difficult races to win, especially in an off-year election.
Yeah. And again, I do think that the old party in the White House and the tendencies of the state to vote for at least the chief executive. Now, mind you, having said that, back in the early aughts, we elected Mark Warner governor in 2001, and we had we did have a Republican attorney general.
Yes. Yep.
I forget who, but
was it McDonald? No. But I know, yes, you're right, but I don't remember his name.
We have split the ticket.
Yes. Okay, locally, we have 4 districts up this year. We have Hartwood, which basically goes from Courthouse Road down to the Rappahannock River over to the Fauquier County line. You'll have Garrisonville, which is, basically Courthouse Road up to Garrisonville Road.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little compact district. We'll have Aquia, which is basically Aquia Creek up to and including all of Aquia Harbor, which is what we did last time we redistricted. We put all of Aquia Harbor in Aquia District. Who would have thought? And then Falmouth, which is just south of, basically it's from Stafford Hospital down to basically following Route 1 till it hits Butler Road, White Oak Road, that area. And then Falmouth swings over to how Falls Run and some of the other elderly communities over there. Both school board and board of supervisors up.
Can't say too much about the school board because I frankly don't know too much about who's running. It's just hasn't been on my. It's been so presidentially focused and gubernatorial focused. I will say, I'm going to say right off the bat, I am keenly disappointed in our board of supervisors overall. This business with and the lack of transparency, the lack of willingness to engage the public, actually going out of their way to reduce the amount of public input, something that did not happen on your watch.
And explain what you mean by that element.
Allowing more public commentary at meetings.
Right, they changed the meeting structure so that they're not in the afternoon, it's just evening, and right.
Yeah, and frankly, if you don't want to hear from the public, just say so. Let's not manipulate the rules that way. But also, the Mary Basilia business, the lady who was on the library board, she was removed. She's a neighbor of Mike Baumke's, by the way, and she was removed from the library board without even being told, and supposedly for cause. And I found myself going, the procedures for removing people from boards. Gentleman was removed from the planning commission years ago, and he eventually chose to leave on his own. But there was a procedure before the board of supervisors, and I just say that this is the kind of lack of transparency, and I don't know what I still find it insulting that somebody who volunteers their time for the library board, which is not exactly a thrilling, powerful commission, can be removed for cause and not even told why, or for that matter, even being told she was being removed. And save for one person, I think that everybody's got not blood on their hands, but certainly mud on their hands, and they're going to apologize apparently at their next meeting for the way they treated her. But it's certainly not going to encourage people to volunteer or be involved in commissions and public bodies if that's the kind of treatment you get. And then there's the methadone clinic. Another one where nobody in that neighborhood wanted it there. Nobody saw it coming because nobody was looking, even though there were plenty of warning signs that it was on the way, a specific announcement that it was on the way, could have been stopped. It wasn't stopped, and now there's a methadone clinic. And I think that's going to play in this next election. I think the whole issue of transparency is going to play. I think you can talk that up pretty well. I think it'll play very heavily in the Aquia district, and I think it'll play very heavily in the Falmouth district. Monica Gary represents the Aquia district, and Meg Baumke represents the Falmouth district. And I think I really think it's going to play. It's going to play heavily.
Right. I can't speak to the library one. I don't know a lot of specifics, so
it was. In my view,
I'll plead the Fifth Commandment on that one. But
in my view, it was a travesty.
Okay.
And it was. I have been on the school board, and we made mistakes. We made some good ones, but we never messed up that bad. And so I just think it's a sort of thing that erodes public trust. You may say it's not too important. It's not an important appointment. Most people don't know about it. Well, actually, a lot more people know about it than you think. And it's sort of like the data centers too. It's like, well, what exactly are we doing, and what are the demands, and what is the data? The Joint Legislative Audit and Review Commission, state body, came out with a report about the power demands on the data centers. It might be nice if County of Stafford actually paid attention to that a little bit more. So I think there are a lot of issues. I really see only now. Monica Gary is going to run as an independent, and so one of the things.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So one of the things, always that's what she's been saying.
Okay.
She certainly could if she wanted to run as a Democrat, but she's enjoyed the independent role, and. I won't say she's been a bad member because there's been a lot of things I've been very impressed with her about, but she's going to have a tough time with the Democratic Party because she in the state Senate race in 2023. She ran as an independent against Joel Griffin, who many in the Democratic Party believe her independent candidacy cost him the state Senate seat by shifting resources and shifting votes. And so the question I would ask is, in the Quiet District, are they going to run a Democrat against her, split the vote, have a Republican probably win if you split the Democratic vote? It's going to be a very interesting scene to watch.
And that will be interesting. I mean, I've heard whispers of names, but it's still early for local races. Usually they do that, and some people announce, New Year's Day, but most people wait till April, March or April, to start doing things. One of the things that I look at that is for both boards is the lack of consistency at the top of the organization. We lost Dr. Taylor. I think the new gentleman, from what I see, should be good. The new superintendent of schools, but the school system has rotated superintendents often. Now we were very, very fortunate. Chris Fulmer, who's acting superintendent, is one of the most ethical, honest people I know, and he does a superb job in this organization. I love people that I can go to and I ask them a question that I don't get spin or twisting, which in the past school board, school office had individuals that might do that. And I think Kisner changed the culture, Taylor changed the culture, and there's so many good people in the central office now that if you ask them a question, you get the right answer, which is awesome. It's one of my favorite things. But the rotation is problematic.
When I was on the school board, we had the same superintendent for 7 years, and he just decided to retire, which was perfectly all right. He was a remarkably talented individual who ran the school system very well. And then it seemed like all once I was off the board by then, we started to have like the superintendent of the year. And I've lost track many times over of who was superintendent when in the last 20 years. Tom Taylor got promoted to be certainly a promotion as superintendent of Montgomery County Schools. I guess we weren't going to hold him, period. But we've had some doozies.
Yes.
I can say that.
I know. I'm going to be polite. Yes.
And some real challenged people when it came to actually running a large school system.
And the same is on the county side. And there's been turnover there. And
nobody wants to be a county administrator.
Yeah.
That's another thing about this board, is that they tend to interfere heavily in the administration of the county on the part of the county administrator, and frankly, I don't know about the current fellow. He's been there a while and things have been going pretty smoothly. The board's made its own mistakes without his help, so maybe they made a good choice there.
And as I said, I don't know him. One of the things that I find problematic is that when there's not the consistency at the top, that other people, and this goes to all bureaucracies, the people underneath have more authority and more control. And that's problematic for anything. And this is why it gets us back to Doge, where people get frustrated with government. Somebody contacted me today because of something that is happening in my district, but in the George Washington district. And he's like, did you know X? Did you know Y? Did you know Z? And I'm like, no. And they're looking at it. We have no idea where any of this came from. And they have to try to work through before a meeting today on it. And so
that's right.
And again, this was just a meeting with the people who were trying to do something. Right. It wasn't a formal board meeting. But the feeling was, we don't know where staff's coming from on this and how they interpreted it. Did they approve something? Because there's no continuity. And there's sort of the issue with rotating people And to a certain degree, and I'll get on a soapbox about this, I don't like term limits. Because if you limit the person who can be there, you lose the institutional knowledge. You know the knowledge. I mean, the Gary Snellings saying, "Wait a minute, we did that X number of years ago," or Meg now is great at, "Wait a minute, 5 years ago." That institutional knowledge that people have is wonderful. Phenomenal people, by the way, in the county offices. I'm not ragging on that, all of them, for that, but it's just without leadership, then they just go with what they think the board wants. And what you're saying is the board's getting involved in issues.
At the operational level.
Right. And that would be problematic.
They're really supposed to be the strategic and policy level.
And that is the theoretical argument.
Yeah, always has been.
That we teach in college.
Right.
And in high school. All right. So we don't know. I mean, unless in theory, if there's a big turnout one way or the other for Spanberger or Winston Sears, but it'll be interesting because Winston Sears will want a large turnout in Widewater, but that won't have anything to say with any of the school board races. But if she pulls out a lot of people in Hartwood, that would do well for Darrell English and probably Halstead.
Well, I don't see Darrell English as having any problems whatsoever.
But then if Spanberger, who had a lot of people work in Garrisonville for Harris and the campaign nationally this year, if they pull out a lot of people in Garrisonville, then that will help Pam and whoever's running for school board there. Whether it's now, word is that Maureen Sigmund is likely to run again, but she's more of a Republican, so that'll be interesting. So that other than the top of the race influencing it, we're not really seeing, unless it's those other issues that you raise, pockets of people being upset at certain districts. But
that, frankly, there doesn't seem to be as much coattail effect in the supervisor races or the school board.
2 years, last year, only last year, the sample ballot thing made a big difference. So there was coattails last year, far more than I think many of us thought there would be. That people went in with their governor's sample ballot and and went in with the state senate, state house, and then they went straight down the line. So that will be interesting if that plays in the governor's race. It may well this year, or this upcoming year, because people are sort of trained to take the sample ballot and go in and do that. We're not seeing as much ticket splitting as you mentioned earlier as we
that seems. I kind of wonder if ticket splitting is sort of becoming a thing of the past.
Well, but oddly, I was going to jokingly say this, but AOC in her district, they voted for people who voted for her voted for Trump. And she was trying to figure out how it is, and everybody's attitude is it's populist movement. That she's big on the populist movement. Trump was big on populist movement, so that's why they vote for both of them. But there is, but as a general rule, but like in Massachusetts, more people voted for Trump than before, but they still vote for the Democrats for Congress. So we'll see. But it's just interesting how I agree. I think ticket splitting is sort of a thing of the past. What was it? There's I saved the newspaper, but how many Senate races? Both senators are the same party in the states, and I'll probably be yelled at because I won't have the number right. But if you look 12 years ago or 16 years ago, many states were purple, where you had 1 and 1. But now there's just a handful, 4 or 5 or something.
Well, Montana is a good example where it went from a Democrat and a Republican to two Republicans.
Yes, and so like Maine's 1 Republican, 1 independent. But the actual split ones is down to single digits, which is sort of interesting. It goes to what you were saying, that it seems like ticket splitting is gone, that people are just going straight down, which is really interesting because parties, we've been talking about this for since the age of Nixon. Candidates send it campaigns, parties don't mean much. You don't get money from the parties, and now it's like you have a sample ballot and it goes. It's really an interesting how life has switched.
It has, and I think it's a long-term trend.
And we'll be long gone. No. So,
No, I'm not going to go on that long.
all right. Well,
I'm not planning on leaving just yet.
so, any final thoughts on either the 2024 or 25 elections? Anything you want to just throw out there as, hey, by the way, I think
Well, I think
Mark Warner's going to be ambassador to the Bahamas, and we'll have no, it's not going to happen, but
that would be interesting. And what actually, I saw the U.S. representatives' quarters in Barbados once. I'll take the job.
Yes, that's one of those perks that are really nice.
But in answer to your question, I kind of give my at least thumbs up initially to who will win in November to Spanberger. My Aries is probably very strong, and I have no idea about Lieutenant Governor. And I think there will be some changes on the Board of Supervisors. I think some incumbents will lose
or not run. Same with school board. Some of them may just be like Sarah Chase has been on there 2 or 3 terms. So and I don't know. I haven't talked to her, but there could be some people who are just like, yeah, I'm not up for it. I'm done. I'm tired.
It's as you well know, it's a hard job, and if you want to occupy every night of the week doing something, you can do that, and not to mention time during the day.
And in many ways,
and your job.
To many, depending on the issues, it can be a thankless job either way. But nobody runs for office if they don't want to do good things for the community.
Especially these local jobs. I think that there's a tremendous earnestness on the part of a lot of people who are in office. Everybody I picked on has hardly been rewarded with great monetary benefits or great power or anything of that sort. I mean, Monica Gary had strong opinions about the county, about the future of development, and when she ran and did a brilliant job running against Paul Mildy, and she's an impressive individual.
Yeah, one of the few, especially in the quiet district, it's one of the few people that ever defeated Paul.
The only one.
Yeah.
Of course, he lost the nomination.
Right, to Bob Thomas, but I don't think Bob won the quiet district. I think Bob won in the rest of the district.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I just think that they try to do what's best for the county, and nobody runs to ruin the world.
I think sometimes, particularly in the I think they do sort of lose the what I'm trying to say is for instance the Mary Basilia thing that just became a travesty, and they got too caught up in their own importance, and they actually hurt people in the process of that. So it's not everybody who gets in this job is necessarily
but on a happy note.
Yeah, let's drop that. Yeah.
On a happy note, I mean, we're the high school 6 is going along.
That is really great news.
It's great. There's different things. I mean, the fixing of the Falmouth Bridge.
That is an old bridge.
Yes.
Before we were born. Well before we were born.
I was at the tree lighting the other night. I was.
That was really neat.
I didn't
go by all the pictures you posted.
Yeah, I mean, I went in. I sang Ding Dong or Carol of the Bells, and I couldn't sneak out, so I sort of limped away through the other songs. But somebody in the fire department made these ornaments.
Oh, I saw that.
Gosh, they're beautiful.
I saw that. You posted that on Facebook.
Yes.
They're beautiful.
They are, and then people want them, and I don't have a way to get them to the people that are doing it. But they did that one large one, and then they did other ones that are 3-dimensional. That's really amazing. Far better at woodcraft than I am ever. So, but they did a nice job. The students had a nice job. We're getting ready for the end of the year, end of the semester. Choral concerts tomorrow night, but by the time people watch this, will have already happened. So
Yeah, actually, Christmas will be over, and
yeah,
we'll be into January.
January will be the new legislative session, and we'll be days away from the Trump too.
Yeah, and I always like parades, and so I'm looking forward to seeing his inaugural parade.
Yeah. I've been to one inaugural, and I don't like crowds, and so I always, when people are like, "Hey, we can get you a ticket," I'm like, "No, give it to somebody else,"
Well, that was
because
nice.
I thought Mom and I would stay home because Mom I knew my mother was really big on this as a historical thing, and so we got to watch it together. And it is amazing about this country that we have a transition of power.
A peaceful one.
Yes. I mean, say what you want about January 6th, but when it came to January 20th, it was a smooth transition of power. I mean, even the year that they took the W's off of the keyboard, it still was a smooth transition of power, which is just amazing when you look at what's going on in Syria and other countries. We have so many blessings, and it's really great.
I agree with you, and it's maybe the appropriate time to wish all of your viewers a very happy New Year, because they'll be into the new year.
Yes, sir.
And it's always been fun being on your program.
Well, it's a blessing to have you to keep the same trend in there. So I want to thank David again for taking time out of your busy schedule to have a conversation with us. It's always great chatting with you and getting your take on things and your insight. So it's one of my longest, best friendships in Stafford.
Mine too.
Thank you again, David, for sharing your time and insights with us. Your knowledge and experience is a real asset to the community. You have given us a lot of food for thought. And speaking of food, between when we started taping the show and now, Representative Bobby Scott, Democratic congressman from the 3rd District, is making soundings of running for governor against Abigail Spanberger. The phrase he has used is, he is not running. So this will have an impact on the race that we didn't know a few minutes ago when we talked. That being said, I want to thank you, our audience, for joining us on this episode. We do appreciate you and hope you'll refer us to your friends. And again, while we're on the subject of friends, we want to thank our friends at Tilly's Ice Cream for their kind donation to this program. Tilly's is located at the Ferry Farm Shopping Center at 215 Kings Highway. Next time you're in the area, stop by and treat yourself. You'll be glad you did. And on our next episode, we'll be talking to Ian Olis about building another bridge across the Rappahannock River. Ian is the FAMPO administrator. FAMPO has commissioned a study to look into this matter. Ian will have tons of valuable information to share. Until then, I'm Tom Coen, and you're listening to the Stafford Connect podcast. Stafford Connect is a River's Edge Media original podcast. You can listen to this show anywhere you get your podcast or catch the video on your YouTube channel. Stafford Connect, the conversation begins here.